welcome to another video from theplayersaid.com. My name's Alexander.
And I'm Grant.
And today we are doing a more full-blownsies review of Atlantic Chase from
After
GMT
another,
Games.
6 hours with it? Six,
Yes.
7 hours with it?
Yes. And first of all, I said that I was going to try and solo it this week. I did not get to that.
Oh, wow.
So, guess what? You get to have a whole nother separate video
Yeah.
of solo stuff later on.
I think that'll be pretty cool.
Yes, yeah, because, I just didn't have time. I was doing a whole bunch of other stuff this week, so...
He says he didn't have time.
Well, you know how it is. But, so, we sat down, we played through...
Two different scenarios.
Yeah, the first two operational scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
There's a number of ways to play this game. You play these grand campaigns where it stitches a lot of those operational games together, and you play the scenario, and then, if you've got damaged ships, they can get repaired from game to game, things like that. But that, doing that requires a lot of dedication, because you're going to play through 8 or 9 pretty significant gaming sessions to do like the whole grand campaign of everything. Or you can just do the operational scenarios where you're going to sit down. Here's your loadout. Here's all your your ships and your task forces. Here's what you've got to do. Mm-hmm. Play it. Score some victory points. You do it in a session. It's much more traditional from like a gaming perspective.
Yeah.
The game also has some, I think they're called micro scenarios.
They're just
or
basically
mini-scenarios.
battles.
Yeah, they're individual single battles that you play out, which
Could be fun, but we found combat probably to be the least interesting part of the full design.
Yeah, I'm not playing this game
No.
for the crispy, crunchy combat. I'm playing this game for everything else that's in it. So just playing those. If I was going to do that, it would be because I've played everything else. And
Yeah.
maybe
Let's just play them for fun.
the combat's in the normal game's quite simple. You just kind of chuck some dice back and forth, and you can position one way or the other.
It's simple.
It's very hard.
Man, it's nigh impossible to hit.
But maybe if I was going to do
Frankly.
those micro scenarios, that's where I would dive into these advanced combat rules where there's a whole double-sided bifold. So there's a whole bunch of stuff you can do. That's going to slow down a big game. But if I was doing just the little battles and the micro
You
scenarios,
might do that.
maybe that's where I would do that. So I guess all that's saying is there's a lot of modularity to this game.
Well,
But-
and I think after having played it now for, I think we've spent 8 to 10 hours playing it, I feel like
more than that.
it is. I feel like the best part of this design is how much you can do with it.
yeah.
The solo mode, which we haven't even tried yet, like you said.
No, but it's like a fully whole massive fleshed
Right.
out system.
The different training scenarios, the little battle scenarios, the big campaigns, and then everything in between. I've learned a lot
Yes.
about this war, like the Battle of the Atlantic, right? How many times did I say, what were the Germans thinking?
Well, yeah.
It's very difficult to get done what you're trying to do there. You're trying to get back to Kyle, and it's like, I got to run the gauntlet of these task force that are patrolling the,
Yeah, there's significant blockades early in the war, and I guess that's the interesting thing about this game is it's the balance between historical situations and outcomes versus an actual game where you have a chance to do something different, or for the Germans to achieve their objective.
Yeah.
In some of these scenarios, there is a chance. How big that chance is,
it's slight.
is a difficult question. But
it's still an interesting thing to try to pursue that.
right. But what the game will do then is, like in one of these scenarios we just played, part of the goal is to get the Graf Spee back into Kiel, right, from the South Atlantic. Historically, that did not happen. It could not get through the blockade
For a reason.
Yeah, and
Right.
and all of that stuff's here. Like, you have all these task forces, and there's all those Coastal Command air bases, and getting through that is very tough
challenging.
and very slow. It is possible.
It is.
It is not likely, necessarily.
Well, it's not likely because there are so many advantages for the defending.
Yeah, I have a lot of... But if you turn around and go back, that's okay.
Yep.
Because you also have opportunities to pick up from sinking convoy shipping and doing other naval battles as well.
Which is what I kind of turned to at the end.
Yes.
My attacking ships were still in very good shape. And I was like, I was trying to bring the battle to bear and try to score victory points that way. I felt like my run along the English Channel was very, very difficult.
Yeah,
I had kept trying it, and I'd made progress. I got all the way to Brest there, and you know what? I'm like, I just got to keep going. And I kept missing the rolls.
Yeah, yes.
Or you would make the rolls.
Yes.
It's the way it is. It's part of it. And I think the lesson I've learned from that is just enjoy the experience of learning about this.
Yeah, it's possible to do things, but, the game is, like, the Graf Spee is going to bounce off that, and you're going to have to sail away, and you have to pick up your points elsewhere. And guess what? That's exactly what happened here.
Yeah.
Like, the Scharnhorst guys now just kind of potted around, shot a few merchant ships and went back to port, and the Graf Spee was like, see ya.
Yeah,
went
right.
Went back to South America. To Brazil. That's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
And you can do that. But if you do some of those engagements successfully, Germans can win it on victory points.
They can, yep.
It is very possible to do that kind of
we
stuff.
looked at the different... You won, but we looked at the different victory. It had one or two things kind of broken my way. It's like, all of a sudden, I sank that battleship.
Yeah, like...
I got 2 victory
points.
points.
I got a task force hanging on by a thread.
Yep.
I could very, very easily, bleed 4 victory points there.
Yeah.
And if I get my convoy in, I can gain 3. That's still a net lot. Like, there's...
Yeah.
The balance in the scenarios is...
It seems to be there.
Yes, it might not be evident,
right?
But I think it's there in some of these.
Well, as we were playing it, getting near the end, and I think near the end, I started to realize really the futility of certain actions of mine.
Yeah,
you had an aircraft carrier with one of your task forces, and that allowed you to continually launch planes that hurt my chances of doing whatever I wanted, engaging or finding through naval searches. So, I was stupid. I kept kind of banging my head against that wall, and the dice are just unkind to us.
Yeah, this was a very ugly game tonight.
I want to take those dice, and I actually want to get a hammer.
Yes.
And I want to have a good time with those.
Smash them up.
Because those were really atrocious. But once again, it taught me a lot of things. I enjoyed the different concepts. We had some interesting experiences, and we played 2 scenarios. The first one was more of it was like I was just sprinting.
Yeah, it was.
My
It's
ports.
getting that passenger line of the Bremen from the U.S. trying to run it back to Kiel, and I think that's the first operational scenario they included in the game, and it was very much. You've done the tutorial. Hey, now do this, right? It feels very much that way. But I felt like when we played that, it was also because the decisions are all yours, right? You don't have the training wheels anymore. But I felt like it showed you exactly what the game was trying to be right off the bat, where I'm trying to move around, being a little, as much as I can, and then I'm trying, and then the Royal Navy trying to intercept you, and then you've got a support task force which you're trying to send out as well to be an escort. Because if I can end up in the same spaces together, they can act as a coordination, which will mean it's harder for me to find you. Or if I do find you, we might do a battle, which in that first scenario, risky. That would
have been really bad.
You might cause war. They don't do that.
Yeah, that was the other interesting thing. They threw some elements like that. Jerry threw some elements like that in where certain die roll results would lead to, war's been declared. So guess what? Now you can fight. Whereas before that, had the British attacked, you would have lost.
Yeah,
right? It would have been
there would have been a die roll, and I could have lost.
Yeah, right, that's what I meant. Yeah,
but the 1939, the August 1939 scenario is pretty funny in that way.
Yeah,
war might break out halfway through the scenario, but if the British cause it to happen, they lose the game.
Yeah,
that was fun. So what it did is it shies me away from just going into Kiel and blasting your ships away in port, right? I don't want to risk doing that. I could do it. I don't want to risk doing that. But I'm just I'm waiting for war to break out to do that. But then the Bremen's getting across the Atlantic and I have to go and intercept that.
Yeah.
So I'm really trying to do that. There was some neat stuff But I think that first scenario really shows, how like the trajectories and your time lapses, your interception stuff, how all of that plays together really well.
Yep.
And they kind of dump you into the second scenario where you have a lot more stuff, and it's a lot more like, go for it, do whatever you want. It's a little bit less
regimented or restrictive. Yeah. I felt like the second scenario was way more of a sandbox.
And I fully agree with that.
But once again, it's that old concept, and I think I said this to you several times. The shortest route between point A and point B is a straight line.
Yes.
So you have a choice. You can run that gauntlet of the English Channel, because guess what? That's the least amount of trajectory that you're going to have to use. Or you know what? You can run around the north side, to Scotland and around and down through the Firth of Forth and come into, Kiel that way. But you're going to have to run the gauntlet of the big naval task forces up there that all have battleships and cruisers. And so it's 6 of one, half a dozen of another, but you can try it. And guess what?
Yeah.
I feel like I could have won had I just gotten a roll or two or a little bit more luck. Those intel markers make it significantly harder.
Very, very difficult, yeah.
Because they limit, based on your speed, they limit the number of trajectory sticks that you can actually remove as part of your movement. So it can make it very challenging when there's 3 in a row, like there's going to be 3 in a row there. Man, you're only going to be able to move. It's going to be like 3 turns in a row. And you know what? If the dice roll all go your way, you may actually run through that, and that's going to be a significant victory.
Yeah.
And you're going to be pretty exultant.
Yeah, if he gets in, like, that's so many more victory points that I can pick up.
Yeah.
I now have to get a full convoy in, and I have to go and sink some of your shipping as well. At which point, you're just going to run away and just, like, go home.
Well, and then I could try to make a run for the port with my big battleship. So I don't know. I think what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of opportunity here to test out or try out different things. I also felt like the system, even like we did the tutorials where they built on each other.
Yeah.
This even built on each other.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
We were kind of not using certain things like signals. Signals is an action that we used a lot more in this second scenario.
Yes.
What was the other one that we used a lot more? Engage, we used a lot more in this.
Do a lot more engagements.
So I still feel, and it's hard, you mentioned it at the beginning, we may have to ultimately do another 10 hours of this in a third video. I still feel like I am learning. Yes. I do. Yes. And I think that, to me, is a sign of, one, a very deep game.
Yes.
A game that has a lot of different opportunities. 2, it's a game that I think is well designed because it's going to test you and try you. It's going to chew you up and spit you out a little bit too, but it's going to be an interesting experience.
Yeah.
And then 3, the thing I really like about this is I have felt so much frustration in this process. Is that a bad thing?
No.
It's not.
And I say it's not because the frustration that you feel is the frustration that was felt by Naval Command.
Absolutely.
I'm trying to catch a small task force
in an ocean.
In a huge ocean.
And that was the one thing. We were kind of looking at these little task forces, right? You've got 4 to 7 ships.
Yeah.
These are not 30 or 40 ship armadas.
No.
And these are smaller ones.
And some of them, like a destroyer might represent a couple of destroyers.
2 or 3. You're right.
But
still, you're not talking about a ton of ships here. You're talking about a dozen.
Area-wise, even spread out in a task force, a literal drop in the ocean.
Yep. And I think that's what I really liked about this.
Yeah.
And the other thing also is, you know what? The Atlantic really isn't even the biggest ocean on the Earth. We've played many Pacific Theater war games where, man, that's an ocean. Right? The Pacific is the granddaddy of all oceans, and it's hard to find ships over there. I just really liked that tension and that, really, I'm going to use that word, frustration. It made me at times want to take those dice and throw them across the room.
Yes.
And because I'm like, I know I need to do this. It just ain't working.
Yeah, the target numbers you're rolling for in this game generally are quite difficult.
On a 2d6, more often than not, you're trying to roll a 9 or higher to seize initiative.
Yeah, for like a seizing initiative, you're rolling a 9 or higher.
That's that's a 25% success rate.
Odds on you're not going to do it.
And more often than not, there are no modifiers to that. I think there might be...
You get the tally every time you fail.
Right. Every time you fail, it builds on it. You get a +1. But, man, that's rough. And even some of the other one, the reinforcements roll...
Reinforcements is a 7.
Is a 7. Which, I know that sounds ridiculous.
It should be very easy to roll.
How many times did we fail that?
You failed it
I
at
failed
least
it a
twice.
ton. You got it done at least twice that I can think of.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. There's a lot of that dice luck. More often than not, I don't like dice luck.
Yeah.
Every war game's got to have some dice luck. Almost every one of them.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting in this is that, like, the dice... So, for example, doing your naval searches, trying to find each other. If you've got these really long trajectories... It's going to be real difficult,
Very hard.
right? Once you start getting into close quarters where you've got really small trajectories, your dice become, like, orders of magnitude better.
Oh, yeah.
So much better. In the combat, like, the dice are, like, pathetic at extreme or long ranges.
Well,
like,
because...
so bad.
And the interesting thing that makes it pathetic is you're rolling 3 dice.
Yeah.
And you're going to take... the 2 lowest results.
And you're going to add your little crappy
+1
long-range modifier. And then if you've dropped smoke, it's -1, which you're going to do a lot of the time defensively. So, like, roll 3, drop the highest, and the sum total is what you get. And you need to get a 9 or more to hit.
So, hey, I rolled a 6,
like
a 2, and a 1.
Right?
My roll's a 3.
So
that's terrible.
That stuff... mega frustrating.
But it's probably indicative of long-range combat.
Very, very realistic, right?
Now, once you closed, you start rolling 2 dice.
And you roll on your much better modifier.
Yep, you get a couple more... you add your
you roll 2 dice and just
value.
keep it.
So... that changed it a lot. And I felt like, I was cocky. You know, I'm like, I'm going to at least roll a 5.
And if you get into the close quarters where you've got your little destroyers going up against them,
3 and taking the highest number.
Yeah.
We only had that, I think, once, maybe?
I don't even think we did that. But then, like, your battleships are just, like, blowing away these little destroyers and cruisers with their torpedo boats. It just get real interesting.
So while we're talking about that combat, I really liked the combat. It was just really hard.
Yeah.
And after roll after roll after roll after roll, we'd be like, oh, we didn't hit. Let's go to the next round. And there's only 2 or 3 rounds.
Yes.
Depending on what happened.
That's the other part, right? Your naval engagements are typically very short.
Yes.
And so you get in, you start at extreme range, you chuck dice, you all miss, and then, like, the skirmish is over, right?
Yeah.
So
and then you part ways and you have to find each other again.
But, like...
Yeah.
That's naval combat
that's
in World
the way
War
it
II,
is,
right?
yeah.
It's these big battleships. You're like, oh, they're over there.
Yep.
Run away. Because you don't want to sink more than you want to sink them.
No.
And so it was very, like you said, there's some frustration in that.
Yeah.
But like when you've got them and you want to get into the dagger, you get a good engagement roll. You're like, let's do this.
Yeah.
And then you start closing in, and you can.
The other interesting thing about the combat was there were some minor tactical choices.
Yeah.
Probably not as many as I thought there would be. There's a choice about whether to use smoke or not.
Yes, if it's not a surprise.
If it's a surprise, you can't do smoke. If it isn't a surprise, you can burn some gasoline, I assume, and set some things on fire, and you make some smoke. But I found, as the Germans, my combat values were better.
Yeah, your extreme range combat values are better.
So I decided, you know what? It's stupid for me not to take smoke every round. Yeah, it's hurting my rolls too, but it's hurting your rolls even more than mine.
Yeah, it hurts both our rolls, but mine worse.
So that's an interesting tactical choice. I think the other tactical choice was whether to close with certain ships, because your ships get more powerful up close. But guess what?
Yeah.
They get hit easier.
Yes.
So it's that balance. And I enjoyed that. There was no screening. But you could leave ships in the back and they're just going to get pot shot at. So they're never going to get hit, or more than likely.
There's some minor screening in that way after the first round when you're
able to
after your
move.
first gunnery checks.
And then whoever's the faster, you can decide to kind of skedaddle.
Yeah, you can run away opportunely if you roll a 9 or more.
So it would be interesting
difficult.
to do those more deeper, advanced battle rules, just to see how that changed that.
Yeah, obviously the advanced battle rules are probably going to give you and I have had a brief look through them.
Yeah.
Give you a significant number of tactical decisions, like your different ships have like different gun
these aren't boats,
calibers
they're
and
ships, right?
turrets and all
So
this
there's
stuff.
a lot
Like,
of more
there's a lot
crunchy.
more. It's a little
But that's
bit
not what this
crunchier.
game is about, right?
No.
That's why we talked about that. The battle part is just a means to an end. It's not
Generally,
necessarily the main event. But
Yeah.
it's cool. You can make it the main event. Just do some of the little battle scenarios.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
But to me, this is not a
It's
naval
not about-
combat simulator in
No,
like a
it's not.
gunline shooty way.
You're going to get into combat, once again, as a means to an end
Yeah.
to score victory points. But it's not the main event.
No, it's reasonably streamlined so that the game doesn't grind down to a halt when
Yeah.
you're like doing combat. It's like you do an engage check, we've got a battle. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
we're kind of done. Back on here. Let's do some more of this. It's a reasonable balance
Agreed.
between not spending a lot of time in the battle board, particularly.
Yeah.
So I think that's a credit to the design, because there are some games where it just you get into the big combats, even like regular hex encounter games.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, oh, it's the combat phase.
Yeah.
All right, like so many dice to roll, so much stuff to do.
And I'm glad this was shorter
Yeah.
because really the game is here. It's out here. I would say I enjoyed this game.
Yes.
I enjoyed the tutorials we went through. I enjoyed you and I talking about what are we trying to do and how do you use these
Yeah,
events and
I'm
how
still
do you
not sure.
how do you do this? Yeah, we still need to learn some stuff. But I also enjoyed, I think one of the things that I really enjoyed, and on our first video review, I think somebody misunderstood. I'd used the word gamey.
Oh, right.
And they didn't feel it was gamey at all. Well, I guess the word usage might be wrong.
Yeah.
There's a lot of very interesting choices that come up because of the result of what your opponent does.
Yes.
That's what I mean by gaming.
Yeah, we're playing each other.
We are. We're not just playing the conditions and the actions. When you do something, it may open an opportunity for me, or it may close a door for me, and I've got to figure out what else I need to do.
Yeah.
Both times tonight, we found some very interesting opportunities based on how trajectories are removed from time lapse and different searches, and it opened some opportunities where you could do some things. And that was fun when that happened, but it's looking for that opportunity and being ready to get it, I think.
Yes, I agree.
So I still believe you're playing each other, but there's... I don't know.
No,
it's
yeah.
good.
I think it's almost like, maybe not an equal amount, but it's a significant portion of playing your opponent and playing the game.
Right.
Whereas some games, you're just playing a game.
Yeah.
The game plays you.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas this is... I'm doing a thing to force you into a thing,
Yep.
or to, feint you into a thing, and I'm going to do something else.
Yeah.
And there's some really fun stuff like that as well.
Mm-hmm.
What I'll do is I'll show you the board, and then we'll wrap up with some final thoughts. So here's a look at the map, and as you can see, it's basically, you've got the North Atlantic, and then we've got Northwest Europe over here, and then you've got, the tippy edge of, the east coast of Canada, and even in the USA is basically just represented by a little off-map kind of box here, South America and Africa. But the board's divided into these large hexes, and there's obviously this big, what's called the Black Gap, a kind of empty sea space through which you'll be traversing, going transatlantic. And there's a lot of action over here in the coastal regions of Europe and around the UK. So, what do you do in this game? Well, that's the big question. And the scenarios are quite different in what your objectives are, but effectively you're trying to, you have convoys or other shipping fleets, and you're trying to get them to port safely, and conversely you're trying to intercept enemy convoys and fleets. Again, the different stipulations and who's got what changes from scenario to scenario, of which there are quite a lot. So the specific goal in each game will be quite different. The other really important thing, and it's hard to show it just because this game's got a bit of table creep. is for each of the two kind of factions in the game, you have Allied or British forces and then German task forces. They each have this task force display that's divided up into these holding boxes. So this is where you'll have your individual kind of ship counters. Some of them are individual ships. Some of them represent, a couple of different, light cruisers or destroyers. Like here, we've got the Graf Spee, the Scharnhorst, the Gneisenau, and then we have some little light cruisers and patrol boats. We've got Köln, Leipzig, and Lutzow. So you'll hold your units off map here, and they're represented on map by either these cylinders, if they're a station, or by these long sticks, which are the trajectory markers. And that's kind of what you can see on the board here. So, he says, putting it down, this task force here, which is the Graf Spee, is represented by these clear white ones. So this trajectory is the Graf Spee. And for the British, they've got this kind of plain one here. This is my British one's kind of a hot mess because I stored. I'm trying to figure out a way to do this well, and it's not great. Oh, I'm gonna make a big mess. So I have all of the sticks on the because if you get these muddled up and flip them around, it's kind of hard to. Like this is the same as this, even though it's got the stick on it. So I try to keep them separate. So we've got this task force here, which represents this big old pile of ships, which I've got here. It's a little bit messy. And then this is a small kind of cruiser fleet as well. But and then you can see these cylinders. These are stations. And a station is just a task force that is in a stationary kind of a holding pattern. They're not currently moving. When you're a station, you're in a much more aggressive stance. So it's much easier to launch attacks and to do naval searches when you're a station. But conversely, it's also much easier for someone to find you because you're in one area doing operations. If you're a trajectory, this represents both kind of a geographical passage where you're moving along, and it also represents time to an extent as well. So, this task force is somewhere here at some point, rather than the task force isn't this one and they'll be moving along this. The task force is here, and it's a little bit abstract, and it's a little bit to get your mind around. But once you start playing it, it becomes much more like you do an action, and then once you see the consequences of that action, that's what the things represent. It's very interesting in that way. So, what do you do? What are your actions? Well, to start with, the turn structure in this game is not it's not a symmetrical turn structure. What I mean by that is, it's not I take an action, you take an action, I take an action, you take an action. It's not I do everything and then you do everything. It's a fluid exchange of initiative as and when things come up. And the one thing about this game that's really nice is, after you've worked through the tutorial and learned the game, which I highly recommend you do, you have this play aid. This is a bifold play aid, and generally speaking has everything you need to play the game and reference. As you graduate from the rulebook to this, and then you graduate from this to you don't really need it anymore. So, this page is the menu of actions that you can take. And on your turn, you continue to take actions until you lose the initiative. And the initiative can change in a number of ways. If you ever take a pass action, this little IC means initiative change, right? If I pass, the initiative goes over to my opponent. This vie for initiative, V for I, sometimes that occurs at the end of an engage action or a stealth action or an airstrike action. You vie for initiative means you both roll a d6 and it's a roll-off to see who has the initiative. Either you keep it or you lose it. Or this SI here, which happens after naval searches or signals, or there's some other things which are like seize initiative attempts. That's where the opponent, the inactive player, rolls 2d6. If they get a 9 or more, then they seize the initiative. They just take it away from you, and they have the initiative. So you keep doing actions until you lose the initiative. And so as such, in a lot of games like this, and by like this I mean games that have this kind of initiative change, you want to go with your most reliable actions first and do your most risky actions last, generally speaking. So as such, you look at something like a trajectory actions, the initiative cannot change. So what you don't want to do is I'm going to do one trajectory action, and then I'll do a Naval Search, and then over here I'll do another trajectory action. Because after that Naval Search, you might lose the initiative, so you can't do this. So you would do like all your trajectory actions first, because those are guaranteed. And then you start doing, I would go for things which have a seize initiative attempt. You might do one, at most 2 of those, because you start to get modifiers. Because a seize initiative attempt is kind of hard to do. 9 on 2d6 is harder to do. Vie for initiative, a 2d6 roll-off as a total crapshoot, right? So those are the much riskier actions with regards to keeping initiative. So you don't want to do something that has you vie for initiative and they'd be like, oh crap, I needed to do a bunch of trajectories. Do the trajectories first, then you start doing your more risky actions. That's just kind of a core concept from this. So, what are the actions that you can do? What are you trying to do? Generally speaking in the games, you're trying to intercept other task forces and fight and destroy them. So to fight and destroy them, you need to find them, and then you need to, really pin them down, and then you need to physically engage them. So, and conversely, that target is trying to run away from you. They're trying to get to port, to get to safety. So the simple stuff is things like the trajectory actions. It's one of the first things you'll learn in the game. To do a trajectory action, you're going to either add trajectories to an already existing trajectory, or you're going to turn yourself from a station into a trajectory. And you can add as many or as little segments as you want, up to 15, because 15 is the maximum segment length, trajectory length that you can have. So to do that, let's look at this little French fleet, for example, that I've got here. They wouldn't do this, but if they wanted to sail over to St. John, currently they're a station. You remove the station and you replace it with a trajectory marker. It's not like you don't lay it across and then remove this. Like, you become a trajectory in that same space, and then you just fill up the hexes, as many as you want to go, until you get to St. John's over here. Great. So this tells the enemy what you're trying to do, but it gives you the opportunity to progress down that path later on. Now, what you can do is you can lay out this many trajectories, and what this does is it gives you options. You might sail along this, and then on a subsequent turn or a subsequent action, you might be able to go this way or this way or this way. Your plan isn't quite as set in stone, and as such, you might be able to fake out where someone else is going. If someone's trying to intercept you, and they like, boop, I'll come over here and try and meet you here, and you're like, just kidding, I'm not going to St. John's, I'm actually going elsewhere. You can kind of do that stuff if you want to. But conversely, you might not want to do that, and this is where some of the real game comes in. The longer your trajectory is, the harder it is for someone to find you, because you're at some point along this very long trajectory. The longer it is, the higher the target number is going to be for them to have to roll, basically. So you can do short things to try and do evasive maneuvers and kind of fake people out, and that has a bonus. There's positives to that. But doing long things where it's very obvious, but it's also difficult to find you along that trajectory because it's so long. But that's a trajectory action, right? You're either putting stuff out Or if you're already like this on a subsequent action, you can add them on. Okay, well, I'll go this way to St. John's. Great, fantastic. It's just adding these. If you're ever like an enemy, and you go through an enemy station. So, for example, let's say if there happened to be a German fleet here, and we put a trajectory marker through that fleet, they're stationed here. They're on the lookout. What we do is we place an intel marker there, which means it's easier. They get a positive to try and find us, or they can do a signals action to kind of pin us there when we actually like move through that action, kind of thing. So that's trajectories. You're putting them out, delineating your path, so to speak. Signals actions are prevalent, especially around the coastal areas here in Europe, because you have so many ports, and you have a lot of stations, like which are effectively acting as blockades. And whenever you have like an intel marker here, what you can do is the opposition is you're like, I'll do a signals action, and you convert the enemy trajectory into a task force. So we've got this little intel marker here, and on their turn, what they're going to do is they're going to say, boop, I'm going to do a signals action, and we remove all of these, and you convert them into a station. And it's kind of like one of those things where you, and again, the actual passage of time that's represented is an abstraction. So in this instance, it's at some point when this task force sailed through this space, boom, we found them and we got them. Basically, right? They're right there. We convert them to a station. When they're converted to a station like this, then we can really we can engage in combat. Like, you've narrowed this down so hard. Like, here you are in this huge ocean. You're this tiny drop, but boom, we found you. We had the intel right there. You happened to sail through my net that I was casting. We got you. But that's signals actions. Is you're trying to get people. You're turning them from trajectories into stations, and you do that because to engage, which is an attempt to do combat, you have to have the enemy, the target, has to be a station. So what you're trying to do in this game is you put out your trajectories, and then against your opponents, you're trying to get them back to a station, and you're trying to be in their space so that you can do an engage action. And there's a couple other ways to narrow that down with things like a naval search, but that's one of the goals of this. That's how you find someone and pin them. If you can get the intel markers, it's much easier to do that because it gives you that signals action. If, for example, those trajectories didn't go through this space and there wasn't an intel marker, what you would then do, so we'll kind of put these back out here. So the Germans here are trying to find this little French fleet. Sure. Let's see, they just came from over here. Great. He says, okay, cool. So we don't have an intel marker on this trajectory. So what we're going to do is we have to go towards the trajectory to try and find them. So the German player, when they have the initiative, have to take a trajectory action. So they're going to remove their station, become a trajectory, and then they're also going to put a trajectory into this one here. So that way, where we intersect this is where you start saying, okay, I've got my little active task force, and I'm going to try to do a naval search. Where's my little search? And there's little markers for this stuff, which is important, just so you don't get confused when there's lots of pieces together. There's my little search marker here. So this German task force is trying to search for this French one. And basically what you do is you add up the sum total of both trajectories, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then you have your naval search table, and we're going to roll on the 10 to 15 column. And then you roll 2d6, and I roll a 5. On the 10 to 15 column, a 5 means what we do is we put a little hole in them. So we remove this trajectory, And then the German player then removes either end of the trajectory, not including this hole. So what we're going to do is you can either remove all of these, which means they're a tiny little trajectory over here, or you can remove these. And we're going to do that because what that does is it means they can't just take a completion action, which they couldn't do anyway, but they can't zip their way into that port. They either have to kind of backtrack, or they'll have to take another trajectory action and lay those out, and do that and do that. We're also, and this is the other aspect of this, at the end of naval searches, you do a time lapse, and time lapsing is how you kind of move and progress time in the game. So when you do a time lapse, you remove trajectories from either end of your trajectory, which is important because you can sail backwards or forwards. And it's, generally speaking, when it happens, you have to do it. It's involuntary. Generally speaking, you always want to do it. Like, it happens, you only trigger it when you want to, but you have to do it. So after you do a naval search, you do... So the Germans would do a time lapse. And when you do a time lapse, based on the speed of your ships... so what do we say this one was? Oh, this is the Scharnhorst and the Gneisenau. Cool. So here's my little ship counters. They both have a little F in the corner of them. And the little F means they're fast. And the little fast, we look at the time-lapse chart here. Fast means when they do a time-lapse, they remove 4 trajectories. And you just remove 1, 2, and when you remove the last one, you become a station. So kind of how we discussed, this is good. We cut them off from reaching their target, and we became a station. So they're now either going to have to go around again, in which case we'll try and find them again, or I'll be able to kind of hop in, and it's much easier to find them now. Because if I was to do a naval search now, I'm going to put out 2 more, and then do another naval search. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Well, now I'm going to be rolling on the 5 through 9 table, which is better than the 10 through 15 table. So narrowing down these kind of things through these search actions is good. Now the real wrinkle is, after you do your little time lapse, the opponent gets an attempt to seize the initiative. So the opponent is going to roll 2d6, and they need a 9. 9's pretty hard to roll on 2d6. So you're going to fail it probably the first time every time. But when you fail it, you get a little tally marker goes up. And what this is a plus, it's a modifier to your next seize the initiative roll. So they failed, so I get to keep the initiative. So I'm going to hop in here, and I'm going to try and do those same things. I'm going to try and do some more naval searches. I'm going to try and cut them down. If I can get an intel marker and signals them, if I can get them down to a trajectory, it's great. And with the naval searches, if you're ever on this 0 through 4 table, it's actually on a 5+, very likely that you'll be able to turn them into a station. So how would you do that? Well, you could either roll really luckily, but that's not likely to happen. The Germans would, if you can turn yourself into a trajectory and do a naval search, we want to cut it down a little bit more than that. And again, this is part of the game that you're playing. Is I turn myself into a trajectory because I want to cut them here. If I can cut them here, my next action is going to be against a really small trajectory. But to do that, I have to put out a number of trajectories. And now I'm 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now I'm rolling on that bad table again. But if I was only to do a small trajectory to here and cut them, you're rolling on a better table, but it's much harder to turn them into a station. I need to roll a 10 or more to turn them into a station, rather than a 5 or more. So there's some real neatness in how you do that. But effectively, I'm going to do another naval search, and we'll see if I'm successful. Generally speaking, that's pretty bad. It's the same thing, so I cut them here. That's on a 10 through 5, I rolled a 5. Ooh, that's really close to messing up. If you cut them, I'm going to remove these 2, and then we do a time lapse. And remember, because I'm fast, I remove 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 is very, very good. Fast is good. You move a lot. when you're very slow and you're only removing 2, it's hard to be like an interceptor. You're sat there as a blockade, or that's convoys, which are getting absolutely mobbed half the time. So I've done that. Now the opponent's trying to seize the initiative. Remember, they're +1. So 5, 6, 7, they failed again. This tally marker goes up. Now they're going to be +2 next time. So you're narrowing down, narrowing down, narrowing down. And then finally, when you get the chance to actually do it, by that time their modifiers are quite good. It's more likely they're going to get that 9, which I really, really like. It makes those rolls very tense, and it gives you that progression of time. But basically, eventually, you're going to get into a space with them, and you start doing the engage rolls. Because if you can get them into a station, which we'll just say that we did, now if you start doing, you roll on an engage table, because you found them, right? The naval searching is over, we're here, we're going to do an engage roll. And because we're both stations, we're going to roll on this 0 column of the engage chart, and a 7 gives us this close result. And the other nice thing about this game is, that's not the right one. We have our menu of actions here, but we also have like every possible combat result, and they're explained because they're all pictorial. So the result that I got is this closing in. So if the active task force is faster than the target threat, treat this as a battle. If it's not, it's just a contact. So because I'm fast, and the opponent in this instance is actually, well, they're also fast, we would treat it as a different result. We'll just say they're slow for this instance. And then basically what you would do is you actually do a battle. You go over to this little battle board, at which point you lay out all of your ships, and you start in the far columns. So we've got the Scharnhorst and the Eliza now. And then you've got, typically speaking, 3 rounds of combat. The last round's going to be round 3. And you're going to start trying to blow each other away. And so you're going to roll dice and target people. So, you know, Scharnhorst, he's going to shoot, it's very long range, it's extreme range, he's going to shoot Dunkirk. Dunkirk is, big French battle cruiser. And you've got these 2 numbers up top, this 3/2. 3 is your modifier for close or point-blank range. 2 is your shooting modifier for long or extreme range. We're at extreme range. So I'm going to roll these dice. You roll 3 at extreme range. You drop the lowest. No, you drop the highest. It's my bad. You keep the 2 lowest, and then you add your modifier. So this is actually, that's one of the best rolls I've ever seen. We rolled literally 1s and 2s the whole game, and it was awful. So I've got this 9 plus 2 for my modifier. I'm an 11. And if you look at your little gunnery chart, a 9 through 12 scores 1 hit. So you've got a little hit marker, and we'll put a little hit marker on the Dunkirk. And the Dunkirk has this little 2, which is their hit points. After they've taken 2 hit points, they get flipped over to their damaged side. They got 3 more hit points. Once they take those, it's completely sunk. So we'll take one damage on them. And all of the shooting and damage is simultaneous. So you kind of just, you roll it all. So Dunkirk, we'll have them shoot back at the Scharnhorst, why not? They've got a +2 modifier. So you roll your 3 dice. And this is what you drop the highest. 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 is a splash, which is a miss. That's much more likely to happen. Gneisenau is going to shoot the Dunkirk. So we roll 3, drop the highest. This is much more what you're going to see at extreme ranges. 6, 7, 8. 8's a splash, it's a miss. It's much more likely that that's going to happen at the extreme ranges. After everyone's had an opportunity to shoot, there's maneuvering. So the slowest ships have the option to move first, which is not an advantage. And then the medium ships, then the faster ships. Basically, you're going to either move closer, or you're going to kind of stay where you are, because if you're in the far boxes, you have an opportunity to try to run away. If that's what you're intending to do, you just don't want to get shot, you can sail away. Because again, at extreme ranges, you're shooting each other from tens of miles away. You just turn around and sail away. That's kind of what you're doing. But let's say we all move closer. Now we're shooting each other at close range. You just roll, I think at this point you roll 2d6, and you just add, yes. Yeah, you roll 2d6, so you don't drop the highest. You just roll 2d6 and add your modifier. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Great, that's going to score a hit most times. If you get into the point blank range, so we've got these these light cruisers which have a torpedo symbol on. They can go into this little close range box to launch torpedo attacks. But they're at point blank range, at which point the battle cruisers are going to roll 3d6, drop the lowest, so they're taking the high results and adding their modifier. Then they're going to start blowing stuff away. That was not very good. There you go. So this is the 10, 11, 12. You start really crushing people at that point. But also, you then go from your +2 modifier to your +3 because you're at that close point blank range. So this becomes a 13. I do 2 wounds now instead of just the 1. So in combat lasts 3 rounds. So you kind of just, you get in, you shoot at long range, you either move in, take another few shots, and then like kind of disengage, or you take a few pot shots and one of the sides starts to try to run away. It's usually what's happening, because it's very rare that you're going to have 2 big battle fleets going at it with 50-50 odds. Generally speaking, that's probably not what you want to do in this game. Usually you're trying to get advantage with fast ships attacking convoys, or being cagey, because when you start losing assets, your task force... So, for example, the Dunkirk is fast. Once it gets damaged, it becomes slow. And that means that task force, instead of removing 4, will only ever remove 2. And it means that they will always move first in this maneuver phase. There's a lot of disadvantage. And then, if you're slow, they also have a +1 modifier to shoot against you, because again, you're less maneuverable in combat. Those combat maneuvers are going to be harder to avoid that long-range fire. So, when you start taking a lot of damage, it can be very bad, basically. And if you have to go to port and, you're basically out of the operational scenario. You might get repaired during the campaign for the next operational scenario, but, especially these big battle cruisers and battleships, and even the British carriers, those are such high-value assets. Generally speaking, you don't want to get into big battle line combats. I mean, there weren't that many engagements of that type, because they would be decisive one way or the other. And you would rather have the assets and be cagey and have the threat, rather than actually going out and engaging and doing some damage, but you lose your assets. Then you don't have that threat anymore. And I think in a game like this, and especially, historically during the war, the threat of these German battle cruisers was almost more powerful than any of the engagements and damage that they did do. I mean, they took a toll in certain engagements, but the threat of them was the real powerful thing to an extent, as far as I'm concerned. And seeing that play out, like, we did some big combats, and it just, like, one of my task forces got shredded, and you're like, oh my gosh, just to limp back to port, and you're just being harried the whole time by this opposing task force who's trying to finish you off, and it's much harder to get away when you're damaged. It's so cool playing out how things actually worked in real life. So, anyway, some rambles. Okay, back to the game itself. The other things that you can do, we've talked about a lot of them, and again, a lot of the stuff you'll learn in the game is changing the initiative back and forth is very, very important and can be very, very timely and very hard to do. But if you can steal an initiative here or there, you can really hamper the enemy's plans and kind of move and get away. Also, whenever you change initiative, when it does change, rather than an attempt to change, you're going to roll a weather check. In good weather, like we said, based on your speed, you'll remove that many trajectories. In bad weather, whenever you do a time lapse and you remove pieces, you roll a dice, and that's how many you move. And for fast ships, that can be like a burden, because you were going to remove 4, now you only remove 2. But for very slow convoys who were going to remove 2, and now they're going to remove 4, it's a blessing, right? It's a boon, because they were able to hide in the weather. It hindered someone's capacity to find me. I moved a lot further than you thought I was going to do, because I was hidden in that weather. But for the fast ships, they can't make use of the open waters because it's so choppy. They can't move as fast, so it hampers them in a way. Now, you can get lucky, and you roll a 6 and your fast ships are even faster, or you can roll a 1 and your slow ships are even slower. But the dynamism with the weather is really cool. The other big thing that you'll be trying to do is do these completion actions. And a completion action is basically that last run to port. And you cannot ever do it if there is an intel marker on you. So you can't have, you can't do the English Channel run and, get in safe. It's just not going to happen. But, for example, if you're trying to run over here, let's get a couple more of these trajectory markers out. If you have, it's up to 6, let's say we're going to St. John's again, I can say, with this task force, I'm attempting a completion action. And what a completion action is going to do is up to 6 trajectories that end in a port that have no intel markers. You remove them all, you get to port, and that task force is removed from the game. This is your convoy home stretch, making it home. And 6 is quite a lot. So you've got to intercept them before when you start getting to this, things get real tense, because they can always try this this completion action to kind of get away from you. But what you're going to do is, I announce this is what I'm going to do, then the opponent gets a seize the initiative roll. And this is one of the most tense rolls in the game, because if they seize the initiative, this action is basically cancelled and they just get the initiative. And so they're like, crap, I got to get over here, I got to try and intercept you. If I can get a station here, we're going to start getting intel markers out. If I can remove some of these, it's very cool. So you just roll, boom. If the roll fails, I didn't seize the initiative, the completion action goes off, thing gets to port. Great. That's victory points for whoever's fleet that is, basically. Whoever's task force that is. But again, if I pass this, right, if I get my roll, I'm like, okay, great. I got to send over, I'm trying to get over here, trying to do naval searches, in which case I'm going to remove these if I can successfully kind of cut a hole here. So now you can't even attempt the completion action. And then if I can get myself stationed here, they're going to have to take the long way round, which might affect how many pieces that they have. So they can still take a completion action here, but then it's much easier for me to try and find them, because if they go straight through you, you have to place an intel marker because they placed a trajectory with a station. There's so much interaction with this game that is just, it's so juicy and fascinating. Again, this is a lot, and I'm a little bit scatterbrained because we've been playing for so long, but play this game. The tutorial is such a good way to learn this. They just give you bite-sized chunks of, this is how a rule works, this is how this rule works, this is how these 2 rules work together. Now we're going to add in a 3rd one. Real simple, and you just add it up and you keep learning on top of learning on top of learning. You play through those 10 episodes, set the game up, boom, and you'll be ready to go. But yeah, this game is amazing. What we'll do is we'll wrap up with some final thoughts. So that was a look at the board.
Beautiful.
Yes.
Beautiful board.
The components, generally speaking, are very, very, very nice.
I don't even know if I would say generally speaking. The counters are great. The map's great. I think the player aids are fantastic.
Yes.
I like that everything's pretty much written on the board. There's all kinds of tables and charts.
And that is a hallmark of Jerry White's games.
Yeah. I think a good solitaire game should have most of what is needed to play right on the board. That's the way I feel.
Having not played this solo, I don't know if you use these charts. I presume you do, but the AI has a significant...
It has a priority list, right? The AI will say, if the AI has only 4 trajectory segments, and they can do this, they're going to do it.
Yeah.
If they have 5 or more, they won't do it. So it's kind of a priority.
It's a bit more involved, from the main solo stuff, but I'm not quite sure. But everything. Yeah, the important stuff's on here, which I appreciate. They've made good use of the space. There would be a whole ton of like empty space. And they've talked about this, that it would be prohibitively expensive. The only complaint
about components,
it's hardly a complaint, is the little sticks have the marking on one side of them, and so organizing them and keeping them organized and not getting them mixed up is quite difficult, because if that marking is facing away from you or facing down, boy, they all look the same.
Yeah, so these two are different trajectory sticks, different task force.
Yeah.
They look exactly the same from that view.
Right.
You got to turn them over and it's like, oh, this one's task force number 2, or whatever you want to call it.
Yes.
But maybe they could have charged me $5 more and actually make that line go all the way across. Maybe it was too expensive. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know
if
that.
it was on two opposing sides,
better.
you'd never have that problem.
Yeah.
As it stands, you kind of got to get, like, I'm going to have to get a tray organizer.
Yeah.
At the moment, I got them in little baggies, but you need quite a lot of baggies to keep them separate, because otherwise it's kind of a bear to organize.
And even your distribution, or you spreading them out into the little baggies based on, I thought that was great. But putting them in a GMT tray based on their markings would probably work very well, and I think most of them would fit in one tray.
Yeah, so
or one.
The most minor of complaints, basically.
Yeah,
it's not the end of the world.
Well, there were some errata, not a lot. I think there was about a page, and I know many of you are going, "What? There's a whole page?" Well, there's about 10 or 12 different things, and most of them
a page of errata, considering there's 200 pages of text.
Is pretty good.
It's not great.
They'll discover more. That's part of it.
Yeah, they'll fix it eventually.
This game, I think it looks great on the table. Any picture taken of this game in play is beautiful. It looks great.
Don't ask me to roll 3 dice for combat and give me 2 dice, though.
That's another one.
Don't do that. Give me 2 extra.
And give me some dice that actually give some good results. Those were terrible. I feel like they're cursed.
They've given us weighted dice for 1s.
Maybe, because we roll a heck of a lot of 1s and 2s.
Gene probably opened up our box, put those in, and was like,
ha ha ha, yeah, take that.
And then shrink wrapped it.
Yeah, right. I don't know. I loved the entire presentation of this. And I think what I like the most about this, it's unique.
Yes.
It's on the cutting edge. It's trying something different. It's expanding the bounds of wargaming.
I agree with that.
To include a different subject and a different way of attacking that subject. This is a game, and this is the first game in the Intercept series, I think is what it's called. Right on the front of the cover. Intercept Volume 1.
Man, I hope we get more.
You could do this in the Pacific. I think you could do this in the Med. I think you could also do this in different times.
I'd be very interested to see that.
You're going to have to change some of the rules because, radar and all the things that are developed, long-range missiles and blah, blah, blah. But I could see this system being expanded into many a conflict.
And you could expand, you could change the scale as well.
You could.
If you did, just the Mediterranean, and it was like an Ancients game, or or Barbary Pirates.
Right. It's the same concept, right? Yeah. I mean, it'd be different combat. They just don't use the same things, but the principles would work.
I think so.
To model that. I think so, too.
Yeah, it's what I really like about this game, and something you said much earlier, is it has a sandbox feel to it.
Yeah.
You have a massive amount of control in this game.
Yeah.
You do what you need to do to, achieve your victory conditions. And in some games, that's incredibly daunting. In this one, you only have a certain number of task forces. So how you do what you do, you can get that done, but it's on your time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You have control about when you move your task forces and when you launch these different attacks and moves and intercepts. And if I'm going to do a time lapse, I might do it with this task force and not these ones because I don't want these to move at the moment. You have so much control over so much of this. That's what's something that's fascinating to me. And that's what makes it so rich, is that no scenario will ever be the same.
Because you can focus on different things.
One decision that you make will change the course of an entire game. And that's something that is a huge standout to me for this one. And I don't know, I that's something that excites me about a game. The other thing that you talked about is how unique this is. Never played anything like this.
And I know we haven't played every war game out there.
No.
Somebody maybe is saying, "Oh, but it's similar to this." I don't know. It's pretty unique to me. Pretty fresh.
I've never
Pretty
played
fresh.
anything like not even remotely the concept of this.
I haven't. I have not. But we also have not played every game.
No, but
known
this
to
is
man.
this is so different from any
It
other
is.
game that I've played.
And it goes about so differently, doing what is different about it. That's what's interesting.
Just yes,
You know, this abstracted concept, these trajectories. I've never seen anything like this.
yeah,
It's so cool.
It's like some things. It's like this is a step away. This is like a step away, and you turn around and look at it from a different angle.
Yeah.
it's fascinating to learn because learning it puts you in Jerry's mind, basically. This is some of the ways that he thinks about how you simulate some of this stuff.
Right.
And it's like, stuff I would never even have thought of.
Yeah,
That's
right.
why he's designing games and I'm not.
Yeah.
He
He probably has 15 ideas like this.
gosh.
That's the reality, probably.
like, his games always give you something different.
Yeah.
And this is, everything's different.
Yeah.
And it's so cool to learn as the game kind of reveals itself. You explore more about the history and the experiences and how difficult some of this stuff was to do.
Yeah.
And then, and just the way that some items are abstracted, like the concept of time in this is
Yeah.
very
It's
non-linear.
very abstract, yeah.
It's so cool to see that play out
Yeah.
and trying to take advantage of that or have that, like, I remember doing a naval intercept on you and was like, sweet, I'm going to get you. And the time and distance I had not calculated into it properly, and you just trajectoried and completed, and I was like,
Oh, snap. Yeah.
like, just some of the elements of this game are just so mouth-wateringly cool.
Well, and like I said, I think I said this at the very beginning, there's still stuff that we haven't tried. We have not really messed with U-boats. I think
We had some mines and U-boats in the tutorials.
but I'm not sure we really got the feel for what U-boats really are for and what they're made to do.
Yeah, like
We had some on there that we were messing
they
with
toss out intel markers and stuff, but like, man, you sneak them around and you do those stealth attacks when they're in the black gap.
yeah, if they're in the U-boat zone, man, you can be deadly.
Yeah, they're deadly up here on the
It's
coast,
just-
but out here,
Yeah, it's
where there's no RAF cover,
Yep.
and they're just dropping your
and they're
convoys.
and it. So that's something I want to play one of the scenarios that has.
Yeah.
And maybe that might be the next step that we try to take when we do. Those U-boats just look so interesting. There's also mines. There's
just
what
they're
were
just
some of the other.
static things that just they attack
Yeah,
when you go into them.
It's just there's so many neat things that I think we still need to explore. And and once again we've spent well over 10 hours on this.
Yes.
It's interesting, and I think a hallmark of what this game is that there's still stuff that we need to look at.
Yes.
And many may be saying, well, what the heck are you reviewing it for? Well, we're trying to share with you what we're learning as we're learning it.
Yeah, so we've kind of done our initial thoughts of like, ooh, this is how you learn it. There's some interesting stuff here. We've played a couple of the actual scenarios in here now, like 2-player with none of the training wheels.
Right.
How does that look? What does it look like? You know, what are the mechanics like? Is this something I'd be interested in? For me, this is like a big winner, especially because there's even more to explore.
I agree.
As well.
You're not going to get to I don't think, to the bottom of this one after a while. I mean, it's going to take you months and months and months.
And that's the hallmark of like a good game.
Yeah, I agree.
If you can kind of
but-
step into the door and explore it, and there's depth and richness to it.
But don't get me wrong. There's sometimes I just want to play a nice 2 to 3 hour war game.
Yeah.
But this is one that you're going to explore.
Yes.
It's going to reward, and we say this a lot with games, this is going to reward you based on how many hours you spend trying it out.
Yes.
Perfecting your strategies, perfecting your thoughts, the ways that you go about things, understanding the concepts. That's what you got to do.
Yes.
For this one.
And what you physically do on the board and how it plays out is interesting enough to me to also want to play it solo. And
Right.
do the full whole Haven't even touched that stuff.
And we talked a little bit about this. I know there's like 10 or 12 solo missions or
and the
scenarios.
solo stuff is I haven't looked too hard.
Yeah.
It's slightly more, I think it's slightly more generic.
Okay.
What I mean by that is here's a time period and you're doing like, this is like a blockade mission. So the AI is trying to get in, and you're trying to stop them from doing it. As opposed to these two-player ones.
Though.
Oh yeah, and then there's a whole bunch of different variations of opposing sides doing that and chasing people down. Whereas this is more like, here's the time period, here are your assets, here's how you score points, go for it.
Yeah.
It's a little bit...
Yeah.
And that's just the nature of a two-player game, right?
Right.
You can make the decisions to go, and I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do this.
Yeah.
That one, it's more like, here's my stuff.
Yeah.
And I gotta defend against
I
an
will
AI.
I will say this, and not having played it solitaire, but having played solitaire games before and understanding what the concepts are and what I like about them, I think a lot of these two-player scenarios can very easily be soloed. I think you're just going to have to play because it's abstracted enough. There's really not hidden information. It's just about going about what you're supposed to be doing and trying to foil the other player when you're playing the other side. I think a lot of this could be soloed. I think people could get this out and play everything solo. You don't think so?
So I only say no because there is a dedicated solo book. And you only
I understand
make that separately because it needs to be made.
But I guess what I'm saying is, it's like you're playing two-fisted. You're playing both sides.
You could do that.
You could do
Absolutely.
it, and I still think it's interesting.
Yeah,
I think it's going to be a little more interesting
even
so than some other games that we play two-fisted.
Yeah, you could. Yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
No, yes,
that's
absolutely.
what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah,
so
I'm totally fine with that. Yeah, you could play this. Yeah, two-sided.
Yep.
You can absolutely do that. Yes.
So I will say this once again. This is probably going to be in my top 10 for the year.
I mean, this game is quite something.
And it's really, I mean, we've only played like one or two other games from 2021, but this is that good that it's going to be there. And I want to keep visiting it. And then you know what? I want to wait 4 or 5 months. And then I'd love to play it one or two more times just to, was it as good as I remembered? Did I like it as much as I did?
This game has legs.
Yeah, I think it does. And I think if you let it will run you through the paces. And I think that's a good thing.
When we played the tutorial last weekend, I have literally only thought about this game all week.
I thought a lot about it too.
Like I was so excited to play this today because I'm like, man, that was so cool.
Yep.
What's the real game going to be like? And the real game was just so awesome.
It was better because I felt like it was more sandbox, but I liked both experiences. I watched several videos this week too.
Oh, interesting.
Jerry had those 8 or 10.
Are those the ones that don't have sound?
I think the ones I had sound, I heard. Okay. But they taught me several things just because I'm like, oh, okay. I understand a little better now what that is.
Like, does it teach you what to use this particular action for?
Not really.
Okay.
Not really.
It's more of like how to execute an action.
But I think we generally did everything right the first time, and now we did it even more right, I think, the second time. Watching things like that after we've played, man, it makes a lot more sense now that I've messed around with
it. It helps to compound your knowledge.
So I may watch it again. And anyway, I enjoyed this. Atlantic Chase, I think, is a really good game.
Yeah, I would.
I really do.
And I'd if you want a game that's going to teach you a hell of a lot of new stuff about war games, and frankly, a piece of history that doesn't have a lot of war games about it. Is what I'm going to say. This is a wonderful product for that. And I think that, again, back to the initial thoughts video, sure, there's like 200 pages of paper in this game.
Right.
Don't let that scare you off. The tutorial will teach you step by step how to play this, and if you want to, you could learn this game. It is not a crazy complicated game in any way, shape, or form.
Especially since it has everything lined up in tutorials. You can learn it. You're just going to have to play them.
Like, the reality is this is the game right here. It's all on this plate. This is your action menu. And it tells you what you can do and what you do at the end of it.
Well, and even the better part, it's got these blue boxes. Oh, interrupt during an airstrike?
For the rules.
Page 22.
And airstrike is on page 27.
Yeah, I mean, it very easy to look up, very easy to reference. very well done, very well executed, very well laid out.
Yeah.
A good product. I like this
Anyone
one.
could learn this.
I agree.
Even though it might look like
It's
that's
daunting.
not the case.
When I opened this and unboxed it, I was blown away.
Right. You start like the heavy breathing, like,
Yeah, I'm like, wow. But now I think after I've played it, it feels more approachable. I think it feels more accessible.
Yeah, the game has a full book to ease you into it. Right?
Yeah.
And then you play it and you're like, okay. And you still might not have any idea strategically what you're doing. But you know mechanically how to execute things.
But I feel like tonight, I think we got
Yes.
some of the part of that strategy side that it's starting to come into focus.
The first scenario we played, I was still kind of like, okay,
Yeah.
quite what I'm doing. This second scenario, I felt much more confident. Like, okay, I'm trying to move these guys here. I'm trying to do naval searches here.
Yep.
I'm trying to hold that initiative so that I can then do an engage so we can do a battle.
Yeah.
Or I'm trying to go over there, do an intel to make you into a station so that you cannot just complete next time.
Right.
And then I'm going to go over here and intercept you and put myself in your way so that I get a bonus to when I do another naval search on you, right? I felt much more confident in this second scenario.
Understanding how to put that together.
Yeah, what I was trying to do.
So we've said a lot of good things.
Yes.
I don't know that there's a whole lot of bad. I did, and I've said this several times, the dice luck bothers me just a little bit. And what I mean by that is those 9 or higher on that's hard.
Some
man.
some dice rolls are very difficult
challenging.
to make.
And I just want to make sure everybody understands you got to make at least 2 of those, sometimes 3 to get done what you need to get done.
Yeah, the tables look pretty cute.
Yeah.
But when you're like, some of those die rolls do not help you. You're like, if you've got long trajectories and you're rolling a naval search, you're like, sweet, I rolled a 7. And you're like,
7 does nothing.
7 just removes one thing.
Yep.
And I was at the very end of that trajectory, so it literally does nothing. It actually helps you.
Yeah.
If unless you're starting to cut trajectories in half and removing halves of them, that's when it starts to be much more important.
Well, that was one thing I really liked about the dice. Looking at those tables, you start to add up, okay, in this column, this is what I really need to get to. How do I get there? Well, I do this.
Yeah. How many trajectory segments can I afford to lay out before I start getting into bad columns
Right.
to roll on?
If I put 3 out, I'm in that middle column, that's not too bad. I need to roll a 9 or higher. Whereas, if I only had 6 out, I don't have to roll a 5 or higher for something to happen.
Or if I only have 3 out, it's going to be really easy.
Good. Yeah.
But the problem is, I'm going to do a time lapse and become a station.
Yep.
And when I'm a station, everyone's going to dogpile me and do a battle.
Attack.
There's so much cool little.
So that was probably, but I don't know any other way around it. Every game's got to have that randomness. I just thought to myself, I felt like I never had modifiers that would help me.
In this scenario, you definitely did not.
Right, you did, which is fine. It was something to overcome. But man, that was one thing that I think I didn't love, but it is what it is.
Yeah, and that could be this scenario based.
Right.
I'm not sure.
We've only played the 2 scenarios. Maybe there's 5 or 6 other scenarios where we don't feel like that.
But even with the pluses that I have, I felt like in this game I failed more rolls than I made.
Oh, there's no doubt.
Generally speaking.
No doubt.
But yeah.
No doubt.
That's just part of, I think, naval warfare during this time.
Yeah, I think that's probably what he's trying to...
were difficult.
Yeah, I think that's what he's trying to convey with the design. So I look forward to playing this more. I look forward to maybe how he expands the system. Remember, it's Intercept Volume 1. Who knows what those other volumes are going to be. Maybe he just designed this one. He's got one on the back burner that, if this does really well, that one's going to hit P500 this year.
I think this one did quite well.
I enjoyed it. I think you need to get a copy of this. I think it's going to go out pretty quick. Once people start seeing videos like this, and once you do like a solitaire video, I think people are going to be like, yeah, this is a good one.
I think if the solitaire's robust, that has to be a big positive for a lot of people.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's how most people play their games. We're lucky. We know that.
There's a lot of people who don't have someone to play with.
Yeah.
And I think a game that's so unique is the kind of thing that people like to solo.
Yeah.
Like something that's... Because to me, solitaire gaming is... I want to be doing something interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And this is interesting.
It is, yeah.
And so I think that's going to... if the solo's robust, I think that's, some big wins.
The only alternative or differing opinion I would throw with that is, a lot of times these unique style games that are so different, man, having a second opinion is really valuable.
That's true.
Discussing it. Is this what you think it says, Alexander? Is this how you think this works? Or what the heck are we supposed to be doing? You know, we talked about a lot of those things.
Yeah.
And I think had I just been doing that at home, it would have been a much steeper learning curve. And I played many a game where I feel like, how does this work? You start playing it, you're like, okay, I realize
and
that's wrong.
it has the tutorial, which is designed.
It helps.
It's designed for one person to learn it,
Yep.
because all the scenarios have a bot on one side of
Yeah.
it. But yeah, you don't. I guess it's true for any war game. You don't have someone to bounce the ideas off of. Like, am I insane by interpreting this rule this way?
But that's what discussion boards are for.
BGG's got all that stuff on it. Yeah.
I don't know. I had a great time with this. I think I've said that 4 or 5 times now. I look forward to playing it more, and I'm really glad that we got a copy, really glad that we played it, really glad that we had a good experience with it.
Yes. So, Atlantic Chase from GMT Games. Unique topic, unique mechanics.
Yep.
A special and bumper production, frankly.
Yeah.
So I would check
Great
this
job by
out
Jerry.
if this is something you're interested in. Has a solitaire. Not sure how that plays, but presumably robust, considering his past 3 solitaire games.
He's a
he
solitaire
made,
game designer,
all that
right?
stuff. So I'm hoping that that's the case. But check it out if you're interested. Appreciate you guys tuning in. I've been Alexander from theplayersaid.com.
And I'm Grant.